She thought she had already won. She was standing in my kitchen, the one I'd built an addition onto with my own hands back in '98, pouring herself a cup of coffee like she owned the place, which as of that morning she believed she did. My son had been in the ground for 11 days. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this. I am not a man who cries easily. I grew up in rural Kentucky, the son of a tobacco farmer, who thought feelings were something you kept in your chest and never let out. I coached Little League for 12 years. I served 2 tours in the Army before I was 25. I have been the kind of man who holds it together so other people don't have to. But when they lowered my son into the ground on a cold Tuesday in November, I sat in that folding chair beside the grave and I could not move. I just sat there after everyone else had walked away in the wind, until the funeral director came over and gently touched my shoulder and said, "Sir, we need to close up now." My son was 41 years old. He had a laugh you could hear from 2 rooms away. He coached his daughter's soccer team on Saturday mornings. He called me every single Sunday without fail for the last 20 years. His name was Owen. And I was still in the parking lot of that cemetery, sitting in my truck, when my daughter-in-law called me and told me she needed the house key back by end of week. I didn't say anything at first. I thought I'd misheard her. The phone was pressed against my ear and I could see the funeral home's American flag snapping in the November wind through my windshield, and I honestly thought the grief was making me mishear things. "I'm sorry," I said. "Can you repeat that?" She did. Same tone, same words. She needed the key back. She was making some changes, and she wanted to do an inventory of Owen's personal items, and she thought it would be cleaner if I returned my copy of the house key, so there were no misunderstandings. No misunderstandings. That was the phrase she used. 11 days after I buried my son, I had a key to that house because I'd helped Owen with the down payment, $60,000 15 years ago, when rates were different and he and my daughter-in-law were just starting out and didn't have enough for 20%. I never asked for it back. It was my son's home. Of course I had a key. I mailed it to her the next morning. I didn't want to see her face. Her name was Jolene. She was 40 years old, originally from Memphis, and she had the kind of beauty that made men look twice, and the kind of intelligence that made them regret it. I had never fully trusted her. That's an honest thing to say, and I say it knowing it doesn't make me sound good. There was always something calculated about the way she operated. She was kind to me in front of Owen, and slightly cold when he wasn't in the room. I noticed. I never said anything because Owen loved her, and I didn't want to be that father. Now I was learning what happens when you stay quiet too long. 3 days after I mailed the key back, my son's attorney called me. Not my attorney. Owen's attorney, a man named Theodore Marsh, who had an office over in Lexington, and who had known Owen for about 8 years. He called to tell me that Jolene had already been in contact with his office, and that she was the sole beneficiary on Owen's life insurance policy, which I already knew, and that she was also claiming sole ownership of all marital assets, which included the house, both vehicles, Owen's business accounts, and his investment portfolio. I asked Theodore what Owen's will said. There was a pause. "That's actually why I'm calling," Theodore said. "Owen came to see me about 14 months ago. He updated several things. I'm not able to share the specifics until we schedule a formal reading, but I did want to give you a heads up that there are aspects of the document that Jolene is not yet aware of." I wrote down the date of the reading on the back of an electric bill envelope. I taped it to my refrigerator. In the weeks that followed, Jolene moved fast. She had Owen's name removed from the mailbox and the front window of his small contracting business by the end of that month. She sold his truck, a 2019 F-250 he'd loved like a third child, to a dealer in Louisville before the 30-day mark. She changed the locks on the house, which was her legal right, and she hired an estate sale company to price out what she called non-essential items, which included tools from his workshop that his grandfather had owned before him. I know all of this because my granddaughter, Lily, told me. She's 14. She would call me from her room, speaking quietly, and tell me what was happening. She was scared to contradict her mother, and she was grieving her father, and she was doing the thing that children who love multiple adults do, which is carry information between them like a little courier, and she should never have had to do that. I told her every time she called that she didn't need to tell me anything, that her only job was to take care of herself. She kept calling anyway. Kids know when something is wrong. What I didn't tell Lily, what I didn't tell anyone, was what I had found 2 weeks after Owen's funeral. I had gone to Owen's workshop, which was in a detached garage at the back of the property. Jolene had not yet sold the house, and the estate sale company wasn't coming until the following week, so the garage was still accessible. I had a spare key to the garage, not the house, just the garage, that Owen had given me years ago, and that I had never returned because he'd never asked for it back. I went there on a Thursday afternoon while Jolene was at a spin class. I know her schedule because Lily had mentioned it in passing, and I want to be clear that I wasn't trying to be deceptive. I just wanted to sit in the space where Owen had built things. I wanted to smell the sawdust and the machine oil. I wanted 10 minutes with the ghost of him. What I found instead was a fireproof document safe bolted to the back wall behind a pegboard of hanging tools. I knew about this safe. Owen had told me about it years ago. He kept his passport in there, some important documents, a few things he didn't want in the house. What I didn't expect was to find my name, written on a sticky note attached to the outside of it in Owen's handwriting, with a combination below it. I opened it. Inside was a sealed envelope addressed to Theodore Marsh, marked "Do not open except at will reading." There was a second sealed envelope addressed to me, and there was a USB drive taped to the bottom of the safe with a single word written on it in black marker. Proof. I took everything. I called Theodore that same evening. What Owen had left me was a letter. A real letter, 3 pages, handwritten. I'm not going to read it all here, because some of it is between a son and his father and belongs only to us. But I will tell you this much. Owen had known, for over a year before he died, that his marriage was not what it appeared to be. He had discovered that Jolene had been in a relationship with a man named what he was, a business partner of hers, a man she'd known for years before she even met Owen. He had evidence on that drive, text messages, financial transfers, a paper trail that suggested Jolene had been systematically moving shared marital assets into a separate account under a corporate name that Owen was not listed on. He had been building a case for divorce. He had not filed yet because he was trying to protect Lily. He wanted to have everything in order before he upended her life. He was trying to do it right, the way he did everything, and then his heart gave out in the parking lot of a Home Depot on a Wednesday morning, carrying a load of 2x4s. He was 41 years old, no prior cardiac history. The doctor said these things happen. These things happen, they said, as if that meant anything. Owen had written in his letter that if I was reading it, something had gone wrong before he could finish what he started. He said he needed me to make sure the information got to Theodore and to trust the process. He said he was sorry to put this on me. He said I had always been the steadiest man he knew. I sat in my truck in my own driveway and read that letter 4 times. Then I folded it, put it back in the envelope, and I drove to Theodore Marsh's office in Lexington and handed him everything. Theodore looked at the USB drive for a long moment. "I'll need some time with this," he said. "Take what you need," I said. "But the reading is in 3 weeks and I want to be ready." The will reading was held in Theodore's conference room, a beige space on the 4th floor with a view of a parking structure. Jolene arrived 11 minutes late in a black dress. She brought her own attorney, a man from Louisville, with a very expensive tie, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having had a hard day. She did not look at me when she sat down. She looked at Theodore. Theodore laid out the will in the order it had been written. He covered the life insurance, which had already been distributed. He covered the house, the vehicles, the business accounts. Jolene's attorney took notes. Jolene herself sat very still with her hands folded. Then Theodore set down the page he was reading from and picked up a second document. "There is an addendum," he said. Jolene's attorney looked up. "Owen amended his will 14 months ago," Theodore said, "and included an addendum that references documentation obtained during that period. The addendum stipulates that in the event of evidence of financial misconduct or marital fraud, a secondary provision takes effect." He looked at Jolene over his reading glasses. The house was purchased with a $60,000 contribution from Owen's father, which Owen categorized as a secured personal loan with a formal promissory note that was drafted at the time of purchase and notarized. This document was filed with the addendum. The outstanding balance, with 15 years of interest at the agreed rate of 3%, comes to. Jolene's attorney said something, Theodore continued. Comes to $87,400, which constitutes a first lien on the property. He paused. There is also the matter of the corporate transfers. That was when Jolene went white. The evidence on that USB drive was enough to trigger a forensic accounting review, which Theodore had already initiated. The transfers Jolene had made were not clean. She had moved close to $200,000 in marital funds over an 18-month period into an LLC that was technically owned by her and her associate. Under Kentucky law, that constituted dissipation of marital assets, and because Owen had documented the entire thing before he died, his estate had standing to pursue recovery. Jolene's attorney asked for a recess. Jolene asked to use the restroom and was in there for a long time. When the meeting resumed, the posture in the room had changed entirely. I don't want to make this about money, because it was never really about money. It was about Owen, who spent a year quietly gathering evidence and writing me a letter and trying to protect his daughter, even knowing something might happen to him before he could finish. It was about a man doing the right thing in the dark, with no applause, no guarantee it would matter. That was who my son was. He learned it somewhere, I hope. In the months that followed, Jolene's attorney negotiated a settlement. The recovery of the transferred funds, combined with the lien on the property, meant that when the house was eventually sold, the net proceeds went largely toward the estate, which, per the will, established a trust for Lily, not managed by Jolene. Managed by a trustee Owen had named, a childhood friend of his who was a CPA in Cincinnati. Jolene's business associate was not charged criminally. The financial misconduct was civil, and the settlement resolved it. I am not going to pretend that felt like full justice, it didn't. But Lily's future is protected, and that's what Owen wanted. What I wasn't prepared for was the part that came after. With Jolene's situation resolved and the estate settled, I expected to feel something. Relief, maybe. Or at least the absence of the tightness that had been living in my chest for almost a year. Instead, I just felt the grief again, clean and simple, without the distraction of the fight. My son was gone. He had been gone the whole time. I had just been busy. Lily came to stay with me for 2 weeks that summer. She slept in the room that used to be Owen's when he was a teenager. I still had his old Louisville Cardinals pennant on the wall in there, which I'd left up because I could never bring myself to take it down. She saw it when she walked in, and she didn't say anything, just touched the edge of it with one finger. We didn't talk much about her mother. I didn't think it was my place. Lily was 14, and her life was complicated, and she didn't need me adding to the weight. We cooked together, she was learning, and she had this very serious way of following a recipe like it was a legal document. And we watched old baseball games on my DVR. And we drove out to the lake where Owen used to fish when he was her age. She asked me one evening, sitting on the dock with her feet in the water, whether I thought her dad had been happy. I had to think about that for a real moment. I didn't want to give her something easy. I think he was the kind of person who found happiness in small, I said. Saturday mornings. A good piece of wood to work with. You were his favorite thing. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, I know. Before she left, she hugged me at the door in a way that felt intentional, like she'd decided ahead of time to do it, and then did. She was so much like Owen in the way she went about things, quiet, determined. I stood on the porch and watched her mother's car pull away from the curb. Jolene had come to pick her up, and we had managed to exchange approximately 4 words, and I stayed there until the car turned the corner and disappeared. The street was quiet. The maple in my front yard had started turning already, earlier than usual. A neighbor was cutting his grass 2 houses down, and the smell of it was the same as it had always been. The same as it was when Owen was small and used to chase fireflies in that yard barefoot until I made him come inside. I went back into the house. I poured myself a glass of water. I stood at the kitchen window for a long time, looking at nothing in particular. My son left me the most important thing he could. Not money, not property. He trusted me with the truth and asked me to carry it forward. He believed I could hold it without dropping it. I'd like to think he was right about that. There's a kind of grief that doesn't go away. You just get better at making room for it. You learn to live alongside it, the way you learn to live with a bad knee. You adjust your stride. You don't put all your weight on it, but it's there, And some mornings it reminds you that it's there, and you say, okay, and you keep moving. Owen would have understood that. He was always better at the long game than I was. I'm still here, and some days, that's enough.